so.
Oh, okay.
Sort of doing this more.
I just, it's going to be the family genealogy. Oh, yeah. Like, in CA and infamily.com. And, but.
So, business licensing task force plus
Jump in.
Chris. We'll get started because I think we're going to lose quorum about a quarter after 11 or so, or maybe earlier. Just because Maureen and Barry have to go.
Jackie, but we'll be here until
Well,
11:30.
I got an eye on the ferry there.
Right.
So
We're mostly blaming Barry and Maureen.
8 minutes behind.
Are we
Right
meeting
now.
here or as well? Is that the intention?
So, we have a pretty full agenda. We've got, we've got a big chunk here, business licensing stuff. What I want to know, just before we approve the agenda, is there anything that you want to make sure that we deal with first? So have a look through the agenda. Let's just take a minute to do that. If there's anything that's going to require a decision, if you feel like you need to knock it off quickly.
5.3.
5.3. Thank you. I'm just going to move all this stuff up so we can make that 5.1. Anything else? You good otherwise? So we're just making 5.3, 5.1, and then we'll do the business licensing just after that. So with that changes to the agenda.
Hey, hello.
Can I, oh, hello.
Hey, Marianne.
Hey, Gardy.
How are you?
The member of the public.
Exciting.
With that, can I ask for a motion to approve the agenda? Maureen, seconded? Robin? In favor? Anybody opposed? Good, thank you. So we'll move on. The minutes of the October 13th meeting, pages 4 to 10 in your package. Any changes or anything we need to note on the minutes?
I noticed a small typo under update. I assume it's none to report, not none to report.
Oh, it was no one.
Okay, there
No
we go.
one to report.
Okay,
Distinguishing between no news and nobody here to report.
okay.
It's the old English term.
I saw something else. Do you want me to let you know ahead of time?
It's fine. The
Yeah.
chair would usually do it ahead of time, and then you guys get to have a free for all tonight.
Yeah.
What did you notice?
Oh, I don't have it in front of me when I was reading. It's just
Oh, yeah, you-
Typo
You can
and,
send it to me. When you get the
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bad habit I have. Though.
No, I
Just
love
see
it.
Okay.
Oh, you must not be a writer then, because I love
Love.
readers.
Okay.
Readers.
And my only comment was some notes on what I was talking about in terms of housing. I might just clarify, so it starts on page 6 of 7. In the minutes, just above where it says action items, so there's 2 paragraphs. And I think, can we just strike the last one, Robin Fenton further advises the Housing Network, because it's not true and, yeah, it's not quite, well, it's just not quite
Yeah.
the right wording and context, and I think it would take too long to
Yeah.
expand it and correct it, so I think if we could just strike that, that would be useful, yeah.
That's good, thank you. Any other changes to the minutes? Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes, please? Maureen, seconded. Rod, thank you, in favor? Great. Okay, public comments. You got anything to say over there? Welcome, Gordon. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Is Cheryl on the phone?
No, she's trying to get through. Sorry, I'm multitasking.
Okay.
I'm just gonna
So we have a new government, and Lindsay's gone off to, hello. You're just in public comments, Bonnie. You got anything you'd like to?
No, I'm just here to listen to business.
Great.
I'm just gonna get another phone.
Sorry, I usually try not to eat in meetings, but I missed breakfast, so while we're paused, I will have a
It's also not been bigger because it's so chewy for all your work.
It is or not?
It is not.
It is.
So It is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well then.
All these meetings are
So do you have that?
under camera, not in camera.
No, it was technical difficulties. I
Oh,
thought we
I
were
see.
having technical difficulties.
So I see a little red light.
Steph, are we being recorded at the moment?
Not live.
Not live, okay, so it'll be loaded later.
Yeah.
Great.
Do you want me to stop
People
and
start
start again?
filibuster,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Just chew with my mouth open. Make a big mess.
So I just gonna use my cell, because that phone has been giving us problems. So excited.
We have a new problem.
Hi Cheryl, it's Steph calling. I've just changed phones.
Oh, good. Hi, Steph. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Cheryl.
Morning.
Good morning.
Put it in the room there. Cheryl, you might not be able to hear us all that well. My name's Chris Corrigan. I'm the chair of one of the co-chairs of the EDC, chairing the meeting today. And
Hi, Chris. Nice to virtually meet you.
to meet you too, we have 5 other members of our committee here. I'll let them say hi quickly.
Oh, hi, I'm Robin Fenton.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm Maureen Nicholson. I'm a counselor.
Jacqueline Massey, welcome.
And Rod Marsh.
Hi, Barry Pinn.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
And we'll just give you a couple of minutes to say hi and who are you and how are things?
So, I'm Cheryl, and I'm providing interim support for Lindsay. As you know, Lindsay Bishop accepted a position with Ministry of Agriculture. So I spoke to her the other day, and she said to say hi to everybody and hopes that folks can stay in touch in her new role. I think she's very busy over there, so that's a good thing. And our ministry, so we have been in the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism, and Skills Training. And as you may know, with the new government, we were moved into the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development. And so our division, we're in the Rural Development Division, and specifically our unit is the Rural Development Lands and Innovation Unit, and I'm part of the team Regional Economic Operations. So just as Lindsay, I've been with the province for 10 years, and I cover the Vancouver Island Coast region, and we'll be hopefully supporting Bowen Island here until we get a new staff person on board. That competition for that regional manager we had actually been hoping that they would be on the ground for November, but now anticipating that it will take a little bit longer and hoping the new hire will be on board for January of 2018. And part of that delay is just that we wanted to ensure that there were options for the new staff person. So Lindsay has been based in Surrey, but we will likely have an option for the new regional manager to locate in Squamish, as we'll be co-located with the Ministry of with Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, and we get tucked in their building. So basically, I think most of you know Lindsay's work. So, but I had been out a couple times to Bowen Island when Lindsay was just starting, so I know a little bit about Bowen, and to let Steph know, I lived on Gabriola Island for 8 years, so well versed in island living before we moved to the Big Island on Vancouver Island a year ago. So sometimes in talking about the challenges of what it sounds like home on team and that kind of thing, but interested in learning more and supporting the team over the next couple of months. And I know you have a strategic planning session in January, so we're hoping that the new manager will be in place for that. And in the interim, interested in hearing the updates today throughout the agenda related to what you're working on, and hopefully I can add some value and help and maybe align some provincial resources as you move forward.
Great, thanks very much, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us. I think, especially we're going to be covering off some work we've been doing on business licensing today, primarily, some other bits and pieces as well, and we're keeping an ear open for some of the stuff that we're doing around community economic development, because that we could use some of your support on. Maureen?
Sounds good.
It's Maureen, Cheryl, and I just wanted to bring 2 things to your attention at the get-go. One is related to a logging issue that we've faced on Bowen Island, and given that you're now in Flinroe, I wanted to let you know that there was further follow-up happening on that, and our council is reaching out to Minister Donaldson, and Minister Heyman, Environment Minister, has also reached out to us expressing some support for our resistance to logging on Bowen. So there'll be paperwork going through the system shortly, and I believe Chris has been, our chair has been involved to some extent in
yes.
working with this. So quite a lot of documentation on what the impacts of logging would be on our community, on our economy, and an ask to your minister for a meeting. And then the second thing has to do with sort of a long-standing, I guess it's a bone of contention, with your ministry now being responsible for rural development. We on Bowen have had a long-standing interest in being considered eligible for the Rural Development Fund. We are currently Rural Dividend Fund, and we're currently ineligible. We did get a one-time exemption in order to apply. We weren't successful in the application, but the competition for this year just opened up a couple of days ago, and once again, we're not eligible to apply. Salt Spring, the electoral district Salt Spring, is eligible to apply, even though it's part of the CRD. All Metro Vancouver municipalities are deemed ineligible. We are, Council is going to be approaching Metro Vancouver Board through the Finance and Intergovernmental Committee to ask for their support in our ask to the province that Bowen Island is a unique island municipality be considered eligible. So that's going to be coming up as well.
And it's Cheryl here. I think that's fantastic. And I mean, those eligibility criteria for the rural dividend were supported by the previous administration. So I would strongly encourage you to engage Minister Donaldson related to that discussion. And Minister Donaldson had previously been a four-term councillor in Hazelton, so very much understands the rural issues and probably needs to be made aware of the challenge of Bowen being included within the Metro Van region. So I think that's a really good approach in terms of, and would suggest that you reach out to Minister Donaldson on that issue immediately. The rural dividend closes for this round on December 15th.
Okay, thank you very
And you
much.
said I would encourage a letter to Minister Donaldson on that issue as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Oh, and then one other item I wanted to, because I was the one that helped Salt Spring and the Southern Gulf Islands through that process. One of the other items you may want to emphasize that makes you different and aligns you with those regions is Islands Trust
Right.
Yeah.
as a governance model. So internally, what we were trying to advocate for is that, yes, although they are officially part of the capital region, the fact that so initially on round one, we were able to get Salt Spring, an exemption for Salt Spring because of the advocacy related to Islands Trust and the fact that Islands Trust was a recognition from a governance perspective of differences. And then the other electoral areas were they approached the province independently, like the electoral areas within the capital region. So I wasn't involved with the Montezuma electoral area, but then they were able to have precedence with Salt Spring to make the case for the lower population rural areas with that capital regional district. So I think Bowen has two. One you are rural, and two, there is the Islands Trust that, from a governance perspective also recognizes there's a different line in the sand there that actually connects you with Salt Spring and the Southern Gulf Islands that are exempted currently.
Great.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good to know. Thanks very much.
And please keep me in the loop as that evolves. The rural dividend staff now report to our executive director, Sarah Fraser. So we're now part of the same team. So moving forward, we'll be working more closely, and we actually have a division meeting in Victoria in 2 weeks, and that's when we'll get to know the folks that administer the program more closely. We've always had a good working relationship with them, but now it will be at an even higher level.
That's terrific.
But, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's nice to have you joining us, and you're welcome to our all of our meetings as well. We'll be sure to keep you guys in the loop. Let's move on to new item 5.1, which is the branding working group and the discussion of the community profile updating. Maureen?
This is a request to hire a writer-editor to update the community profile that was produced 2 years ago. So at the time we did it, it was, I think, the first publication that, is this correct, Jackie? It was the first publication out of this committee. Heather Priddy was the writer, editor involved. The suggested cost here is in line with what it cost the last time. The reasons for updating are that the census data is rolling out and will be rolled out by the end of November. And also the branding initiative has occurred and the publication should be rebranded.
We talked about this a bit at our last meeting. Any discussion on this? There's a resolution here as well. Is there any discussion before we make the recommendation?
No, just that community profile was identified as being a real priority for development of economic initiatives. So yeah, absolutely. And there was recognition that it would need to be updated, obviously, as specified. So I certainly support that.
Good. So there's a recommendation on the agenda here for that the EDC hire the writer editor to update the profile for a cost of no more than $1,500, and that the EDC accept the offer by Rethink to rebrand the publication at no cost. Would somebody like to move that? Thanks, Jackie. Seconded. Maureen, and all in favor of that? Great, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So let's move on to 5.2 now, which is the Business Licensing Task Force report, the feasibility study, which is the bulk of this document here this morning.
So maybe I should ask, has everybody, well, we've all been involved, but Rod and Barry and I, and Chris and Shanna Richmond. So Jackie and Rod, I guess I just need to get a fix on how in detail I need to be. Have you had a chance to read through this, or?
I've just skimmed through it. Honestly.
Yeah, I skimmed. I didn't read everything, but I did look at it.
And it's really impressive work. Thank you so much.
Very
for
comprehensive. I started reading one of the interviews and went, oh, this is great. And then I saw there was more, and there was more, and there was more. So that's why I didn't read all of them.
But that's the feedback that I sent it out to a couple of other people outside of the committee, and I think, well, for the most part, we can make our way through it. It probably needs restructuring to be more reader-friendly.
Yeah.
Shorten the report, put some stuff in appendices, and
Yes.
then folks who are either time-pressed or not that interested can get enough information to be able to make a decision. So the decision that we have as a committee is whether this is ready to go forward to council for council to make its decision. And so at the end of our discussion, if we can have that vote. If you feel as though you can support it, that's great. If you can't support it as such, then it goes forward for information anyway, because the decision-making body will be council. So this was, I'll just go through quickly and you guys chime in when you need to, or take it over when you need to. So the recommendation that is in the report is that council direct staff to review the business licensing feasibility report presented at the meeting of the 27th. So this is on the agenda planning for council on the 27th of November, and for staff to identify next steps and resources required for the implementation of the business licensing program. And the council considered the implementation of a business licensing program as a priority under strategic priority F, robust and resilient local economy in the Island Plan 2018. So that's to get it on the plan, staff focused on it, given all of their other priorities, and to report back to council. Does that seem like a reasonable recommendation? It's a soft recommendation.
Yeah. And I think, and I read further on, it includes some community consultation, right? Like, it's not like this is it, do it. It's let's get it on the plan, and then let's do a couple more steps, and then, okay.
Yeah. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with background info and recommendations regarding the feasibility. It responds to a direction of council that was provided back in 2016. There's background information that points to the fact that the majority of municipalities in the province have business licensing, and generally the response is that, oh my gosh, you don't have business licensing, how do you plan? It's also a requirement under our land use bylaw.
Interesting, yeah. So
Everyone's in violation because we didn't establish a municipal licensing program. And back in 2004, the then bylaw coordinator, Chris Buchanan, did quite a lot of work, got to council. It wasn't, staff were not directed at that time to do further work given other priorities. Is that about it?
Yeah.
Your background? Okay. So then the scope of work is outlined here, and we thought it was important to outline what we were doing and what we weren't doing. So we didn't go into a lot of detail on the impact on BIM staff and the other resources, because that's going to be subject to figuring out exactly what the implementation is and the scope of the licensing. You could start small, go big. You could start big. And if you make one or the other decision, then obviously impact on resources. It also doesn't address in-depth issues related to short-term rentals. And I think that's a really important point, because when council members have looked at what other communities are doing in regards to short-term rentals and responding to those issues, one of the foundational pieces is that there is a business licensing program in place. So until we have a business licensing program in place, the tools that we have to address issues around short-term rentals are somewhat limited to complaints from the public. But there aren't opportunities like withdrawing a license. We don't actually know how many homes are operating those short-term rentals. We can do certain kinds of detective work, but where communities have actually dealt with this quite effectively, if you look at Tofino, for example, they have business licensing, and then they have complaint-driven bylaws, they have active follow-up, so looking at Facebook, looking at Airbnb. They also signed on for a component of what's called iCompass, and they do monitoring, sort of electronic monitoring, so that it's not as labor intensive. But that is all kind of out of scope and somewhat another conversation, I think. Is that fair enough? Yeah. Okay, and then the methodology, we used a number of tools. We did a presentation to the public. There was a structured review of other communities, 16 other communities, telephone interviews with BizPal, which is an online business permit and licensing information system, follow-up interviews, a phone interview, consultation with the 3 other mayors in the many metro municipalities, online survey of local contractors, liaison with the proposed regional licensing program, and then email consultation with inspection agencies like Vancouver Coastal Health and also with our fire department. Those were the folks who responded. So the next dozen or so pages are the actual findings, and this is the section that I would propose we move into an appendix.
Yeah, I think I would agree, and if there was some way, and maybe it's covered in the key points, but of a very short, these are some of the main, like, yeah, if you could do a short summary and say refer to the appendix for all of them,
Yeah.
that would be really useful.
Yeah, okay, so we'll write up a summary. So in that big chunk, were there any specific questions that you guys have? That, whether the point wasn't clear?
Are you talking about the interview specifically?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the big summary. So the presentation on business licensing, part A, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. We've reviewed that in committee before. The structured review of online information is summarized. And I mean, some of the key points in here are how many of the comparators actually require licensing. All but one. That's a telling point.
And isn't it one, it's underword, is it Lansdale or something,
Yeah.
that's like, they have it on their radar as well?
Yeah, yeah. Shanna spoke about that. She had spoken with the person in Lansville, and his response was, he was new to the job, and he said, oh my God, we're getting up, more or less. Yeah. And a lot of these, this part, the structured review, we divvied up within the committee members, and all of us participated in that. This pile, there's enough material in here, I think, for you to get a sense of what's going on there. We looked to it initially because we wanted an online payment system. It doesn't offer an online payment system. And then Barry, did you want to say something about all of the interviews that you did, more in-depth interviews?
No, just to follow up what you said, just generally, the attitude was that this is a critical component of daily life and business life, and but within that there was quite a difference in what emphasis was placed on finding every business and specific types of business, and some of it was community related. And for example, Ucluelet, which is a resort type community, they had a different emphasis than maybe what Sea Shelt had. So no, just it was enlightening to see there some things repeat, but I felt it gave a good overview of the issues and what was important in the process. Yeah, and the comments speak for themselves. So again, some were more active in making sure that every business was licensed, whereas others, it was a bit more laid back and relying on complaints, or if they saw an advertisement in the paper for a business, then they would follow it up. But most felt confident they had covered most of the businesses and ones that would have an impact in the community. There wasn't much concern about, again, the crafter making crafts at home and how they sold. But in terms of business that might have effect on the health and safety of the community, most of them felt that they were in control of it and had ways of identifying it. Yeah.
And maybe just, I'm thinking about our summary that we're talking about, bringing to bear some of the points you discovered about who undertakes the business licensing, like administratively within the staff.
Yeah, there was a little mixture of that it was handled by bylaws, or in one case the planner. Eventually it touched bylaws somewhere, but yeah.
For enforcement mostly.
For enforcement, yeah.
Seems like the planning departments mostly took the money, issued the licenses, and bylaws did the enforcement.
Yeah, a little bit. Gibson's did the bylaws, did the collection, and I think it was more bylaws collecting than planning. But sometimes it might be the same person.
There was quite a bit of variation, and I sort of took comfort in that, because it meant to me that each community had figured out how this was going to work on the ground, and there didn't seem to be huge constraints on how they configured the administration of the process.
Well, other than there was a common theme of, again, not enough manpower and hours to really get in depth with it, especially when it came to terms of tracking revenues and costs. It was sometimes it was the systems, but sometimes it was just we don't have the time to separate that, so they lumped it in with everything else. And again, that seemed to be a common theme. And as it applied to enforcement as well, I think there wasn't a lot of active enforcement. It was usually they were relying on a complaint, or something showed up in a building permit where somebody might be adding a B&B in. But yeah, so I think that was the amount of time being spent on it was constricted in general.
So the next section of this report is a fairly lengthy list of points that were brought up with the person in the district of North Van. So that's a community that's obviously much larger, and the person, actually there are two people who are dealing with properties and business licensing. And she had a number of, I think, good warnings to us about not making the structure of a licensing program too complicated for all sorts of reasons, including if you do want to take it online. If it's a complicated structure, it's hard when you put it online. So her recommendations were to keep it simple and don't use them as a model at all. Which is good to hear.
That reflected too in the number of license classifications and fees. Some had one, and they seemed to say it was too little, and there were ones that had multi and said it was too much. So there seemed to be a common that you have a few classifications for size or type of industry. Or,
Some use number of employees, and she recommended not doing that because she said that sometimes people would not remember all of their employees if it was related to the cost of the license.
I think the highest fees are charged for companies with many employees and for companies such as escort service.
And,
Oh, yeah, right.
good example.
It turns out there's only 4 workers on board.
so the next
Maybe it should be hours of work.
The next section was a bit of consultation with the mayors of Anmore, Belcarra, and Lions Bay. And 2 of those communities have business licensing, but Belcarra, they issue 25 business licenses a year. So, very small scale. Lions Bay does not have business licenses, and Carl Burr was quite clear that he didn't want to go in that direction, and at the same time he has challenges knowing what kind of business, if any, is taking place in his community. And they're using temporary use permits, which, as the name suggests, they're temporary, so it's not a long-term solution to issues around, he's using this to deal with short-term rentals and B&Bs. We did a survey of local contractors using some super simple 2 questions, and I think the upshot of that was that there was not broad support for intermunicipal business licenses, but there was some support for that. And then there's a little bit on the licensing program that Metro Vancouver is working on for regional licensing for film and contractors, and that's a ways off with the inspection agencies, the fire department, and Vancouver Coastal Health said this would be very helpful.
I thought it was just interesting with the local contractors indicating that they're not interested really in intermunicipal business licenses, because that's one of the things we wondered about and thought it might be helpful, but it's like there's not really appetite for that.
There's not a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the recommendation that's related to that is just to defer discussion, recommendation 17, with the North Shore municipalities until we've got something in place that council approves it. And then maybe once it's in place, maybe when there's like a higher awareness, there might be more people. Because I think, Rod, you were interested personally in intermunicipal, is that correct?
I have had business licenses off of Bowen before, but at this point I would answer no to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I don't think we should breeze over the one point that you just brought up, because I think it's, in terms of the rationale for business licenses, not so much the feasibility, but the rationale. The comments that were collected from the fire department, from Coastal Health, and in the end, did we get a comment from WCB?
No, they didn't get back to us.
But I think we can pretty much assume what they were going to say. But particularly in our own fire chief commenting that he felt that business licenses would be helpful in doing what he's doing. And Coastal Health, again, a positive. So, anyway, I don't think we should gloss over that, because that's sort of, at the end of the day, they're asking us for the feasibility of implementing the license program, but it's the rationale for it that people need to realize. And that, I mean, maybe I'll just jump to the contract, back to the contractor again. I thought from, again, just from the simple questions we asked them, that among the people who answered, there were definitely contractors who don't really understand intermunicipal business licenses and probably don't understand business licenses either, just from some of the comments that they left. So there's an education piece there.
And what's the reason why you're not interested in intermunicipal?
Because I'm not doing any business off of.
Oh, I see.
So I would definitely be interested in a Bowen business license. But
Right.
So then the recommendations, which will follow a shorter summary. So I wondered, I wasn't quite sure about the best way to do this, and what I came up with, and tell me if this would work for you. We're just going through them one by one and seeing if you can live with them
Yeah.
going forward to council, or whether there's something in the recommendation that for you is a non-starter. Would that work?
Yeah, great, let's do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so recommendation 1, which is included as a priority. Anybody object? No.
Works good.
2, if it's supported, after further study by staff, implement the program in July 2018, alternatively implement the program for calendar year 2019.
Thank you.
So
That sounds reasonable.
I think that's a great recommendation. Do you think it's possible that they're going to come back and say, can you continue to study it further? As opposed to staff taking on that role?
They might, that's one of the alternatives later in the report. I mean, this could get kicked back to us
Sure.
without it ever going forward to staff. One bit of feedback I got on this, and we talked a bit about it within the task force, is that we have an election in October 2018, and do we really want business licensing to be an election issue?
Probably not.
Do you think there's that much resistance? Like based on?
I think there's a lack of understanding.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
And
So
so-
it could
and
become an issue, and where it doesn't need to be. I mean, I think